The crash and the hunter, the warning alarm screamed through the cockpit as Marcus Chen fought to keep his transport ship steady. Red lights flashed across every control panel, and the smell of burning circuits filled the air. He had been making a routine supply run to the outer colonies when his navigation system suddenly failed, throwing him off course into uncharted space. "Come on, old girl," Marcus muttered, his hands moving quickly across the controls. He was a skilled engineer, but even his expertise couldn't fix everything that was breaking at once. The ship's hull groaned under stress as it was pulled toward a planet that wasn't supposed to exist according to his star charts. The planet looked Earth-like from space, with blue oceans and green continents, but Marcus knew appearances could be deadly. As his ship entered the atmosphere, the heat shields began failing. He had perhaps minutes before complete system failure. Using every trick he had learned in his 10 years as a space engineer, Marcus managed to angle the ship toward what looked like a forested area near a mountain range. The crash came faster than expected. The ship clipped several massive trees. Before slamming into a rocky clearing with a sound like thunder, Marcus felt his safety harness dig into his chest as he was thrown forward, then sideways as the ship rolled twice before coming to rest against a boulder the size of a house. When the world stopped spinning, Marcus took inventory of his situation. His left arm was bleeding from a deep cut where broken metal had sliced through his flight suit. His ribs ached with each breath, and his head throbbed from hitting the control panel. But he was alive, which was more than he had expected during those final moments of the crash. The ship's emergency systems were completely dead. No communications, no distress beacon, no hope of rescue. Marcus gathered what supplies he could find: a basic medical kit, some emergency rations, a water purifier, and a plasma cutter that might serve as a weapon if needed. The cut on his arm was still bleeding, so he used the medical kit to clean and bandage it as best he could as he stepped outside the wrecked ship. Marcus was struck by how Earth-like this planet felt. The gravity was similar, the air was breathable, and the temperature was comfortable. But there were differences too. The trees were taller than any he had seen on Earth, with silver bark that seemed to shimmer in the sunlight. Strange birds, with 4 wings, flew overhead, making sounds like musical chimes. Marcus had been walking for about an hour, looking for a source of fresh water when he first felt like he was being watched. It was just a feeling at first, the kind of sensation that made the hair on the back of his neck stand up. He stopped walking and looked around carefully, but saw nothing unusual. The forest was full of normal sounds: wind through the leaves, distant bird calls, the buzzing of insects. But the feeling persisted. Someone or something was following him as the day wore on. Marcus found a small stream and refilled his water supplies. The bleeding in his arm had stopped, but the bandage was soaked through with blood. He decided to clean the wound again, removing the old bandage and washing the cut with clean water from the stream. That's when he saw her. She was crouched behind a cluster of silver trees about 50 meters away, watching him intently. At first glance, she looked almost human, but there were clear differences. Her skin had a slight blue tint, and her hair was pure white and seemed to move on its own even when there was no wind. Her eyes were larger than a human's, with golden irises that seemed to glow in the forest shadows. She was tall and lean, with graceful movements that reminded Marcus of a predator. When their eyes met, Marcus felt his heart rate increase. She wasn't human, but she was clearly intelligent. The way she watched him showed curiosity, rather than simple animal instinct. Marcus raised his hands slowly, palms out, in what he hoped was a universal gesture of peace. "Hello," he said softly. "I'm not here to hurt you." The alien female tilted her head slightly, studying him. Then, to Marcus's surprise, she began moving closer. Her movements were fluid and silent, like a cat stalking its prey. Marcus forced himself to remain still, even though every instinct told him to run. She stopped just a few feet away from him, close enough that he could see the intricate patterns in her golden eyes. Without warning, she reached out and touched the cut on his arm. Marcus flinched, but didn't pull away. Her touch was gentle, almost curious. Then she did something that completely shocked him. She leaned forward and slowly licked the blood from his arm, cleaning the wound with the same care a cat might show to a kitten. Her tongue was warm and had a strange tingling sensation, as if it contained some kind of natural antiseptic. After cleaning the wound, she looked up at Marcus's face. For a moment, they stared at each other in silence. Then she pressed her forehead against his shoulder and made a soft sound, almost like a purr. The gesture felt protective, comforting, and utterly alien, all at the same time. Marcus slowly lowered his hands and placed one gently on her shoulder. She didn't pull away. Instead, she seemed to relax against him, as if she had been alone for a very long time and had forgotten what companionship felt like. "What's your name?" Marcus asked softly, though he didn't expect an answer. She looked up at him, and it made a series of soft sounds that were clearly language, but nothing like any human language Marcus had ever heard. The sounds were musical, almost like singing. When she finished, she pointed to herself and repeated one of the sounds. "Lyra." "Lyra," Marcus repeated, and saw her eyes brighten. "I'm Marcus." She tried to repeat his name, but the human sounds were difficult for her. The best she could manage was Marcus, which made Marcus smile. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of purple and gold, Lyra took Marcus's hand and led him deeper into the forest. She seemed to know exactly where she was going, following paths that were invisible to Marcus but clear to her. After about an hour of walking, they reached a set of ancient stone ruins, partially covered by vines and moss. The ruins looked like they had once been a temple or some kind of ceremonial building. The architecture was clearly alien, with flowing curves and spiraling towers that seemed to grow from the ground rather than being built upon it. Lyra led Marcus to a chamber that was still mostly intact, with walls that blocked the wind and a ceiling that kept out the rain. Inside the chamber, Lyra showed Marcus how to start a fire using stones that created sparks when struck together. The light from the fire revealed more details about the ruins. The walls were covered with carvings that told some kind of story, showing figures that looked like Lyra's people living in harmony with the forest. As they sat by the fire, Marcus shared some of his emergency rations with Lyra. She was hesitant at first, but curiosity won over caution. She tried the food carefully, making faces at some flavors and appearing to enjoy others. In return, she offered Marcus some kind of fruit she had gathered, which tasted sweet and left him feeling more energetic than he had since the crash. But their peaceful moment was interrupted by a sound from outside the ruins. It was a howling noise, but not like any animal Marcus had ever heard. It sounded almost mechanical, like a machine trying to imitate a living creature. Lyra's entire demeanor changed instantly. She grabbed Marcus's arm, her golden eyes wide with fear, and pointed toward the chamber's exit. Marcus could hear them now, multiple sources of the howling sound, coming from different directions. Whatever was making those noises was surrounding the ruins. Lyra pulled Marcus deeper into the chamber, toward what looked like a dead end. But she pressed against one of the carved stones, and a hidden passage opened in the wall. As they slipped through the secret passage, Marcus caught a glimpse of the creatures that had been hunting them. They looked similar to Lyra's species, but different in disturbing ways. Their skin was gray instead of blue, their eyes were red instead of gold, and they moved with a mechanical stiffness that suggested they weren't entirely natural anymore. The passage led to an underground tunnel system that connected to other parts of the ruins. Lyra moved through these tunnels like she had been here many times before. Marcus followed close behind, his mind racing with questions. Who were those creatures? Why were they hunting Lyra? And what had happened to make them look so different from her? They emerged from the tunnels in a different part of the ruins, one that was more hidden from view. Lyra led Marcus to a small chamber that seemed to be her home. There were sleeping furs, tools made from stone and metal, and what looked like a collection of artifacts from the ruins. As they settled down for the night, Marcus noticed that Lyra kept looking toward the tunnel entrance with worry in her golden eyes. She was clearly expecting the hunters to find them eventually. Marcus made a decision that would change both their lives. He pulled out his plasma cutter and showed it to Lyra, demonstrating how it could cut through stone with a beam of superheated energy. Lyra's eyes widened with amazement. She had never seen technology like this before. Marcus began explaining, using gestures and simple words, how human tools worked. He showed her his water purifier, his medical scanner, and other devices from his survival kit. With each demonstration, Lyra became more excited and curious. Then she did something that surprised Marcus again. She went to her collection of artifacts and brought back a crystal that glowed with internal light. When she touched it, the crystal grew brighter, and Marcus felt a strange tingling sensation in the air around them. The crystal was clearly some kind of technology, but it was based on principles that human science didn't understand. As they shared their knowledge with each other, Marcus began to understand that Lyra wasn't just another member of her species. She was different, special in some way that made her own people fear her. The hunters weren't random predators. They were specifically looking for her. The sound of howling grew closer throughout the night, and Marcus knew that tomorrow would bring a confrontation. But now he and Lyra were no longer alone. They had each other, and they had begun to combine human technology with alien knowledge in ways that neither species had ever imagined possible. As Marcus drifted off to sleep, Lyra curled up next to him, her warm presence a comfort in the strange and dangerous world he had crashed into. Tomorrow would test everything they had learned about each other, but tonight they were safe, and they were together. The bond beyond species. Marcus woke to the sound of Lyra's rapid breathing. In the dim light of the glowing crystal, he could see her golden eyes wide with alarm as she listened to sounds coming from the tunnels above. The mechanical howling had stopped, replaced by something worse. The careful, deliberate movements of hunters who had found their prey's hiding place. "They're here," Marcus whispered, though he knew Lyra couldn't understand his words. She didn't need to. The fear in her posture told him everything he needed to know. Moving quietly, Marcus gathered his equipment while Lyra collected her most precious artifacts. She had explained to him the night before, using gestures and drawings in the dirt, that she was the last of her kind who could still use the old crystal technology. The others, the hunters, had given up their natural abilities in exchange for mechanical enhancements that made them stronger, but cost them their connection to the ancient powers. The first hunter appeared at the tunnel entrance just as Marcus and Lyra were preparing to leave through a back passage. The creature that stepped into their chamber was a nightmare version of Lyra's graceful form. Its skin was gray and metallic, with visible mechanical implants running along its arms and face. Its red eyes glowed with artificial light, and when it spoke, its voice had the flat, emotionless tone of a machine. "Lyra of the deep crystal," it said in her musical language, though the words sounded harsh and wrong coming from its mechanical throat. "You will return with us. Your abilities belong to collective." Lyra stepped forward, placing herself between Marcus and the hunter. She raised her glowing crystal, and Marcus felt the air around them charged with energy. When she spoke, her voice carried a power that made the chamber walls vibrate. "I choose my own path, Seeker Dravex. I will not become like you." The hunter called Dravex tilted its head, studying Marcus with cold curiosity. "You have contaminated yourself with alien contact. This makes your recovery more urgent." That's when Marcus understood. They weren't just hunting Lyra because she was different. They were hunting her because she had chosen to interact with him, a human. In their view, she was becoming corrupted by alien influence. "Over my dead body," Marcus said, raising his plasma cutter. The weapon hummed to life, casting blue light across the chamber walls. Dravex looked at the human weapon with what might have been amusement. "Primitive technology. It cannot threaten us with such tools." Marcus smiled grimly. "Let me show you what human primitive technology can do." The battle began when 2 more hunters entered the chamber. Marcus had been in dangerous situations before, but nothing had prepared him for fighting enemies who moved faster than human reflexes could follow. The hunters' mechanical enhancements gave them incredible speed and strength. But Marcus had something they didn't expect: tactical thinking. Instead of trying to fight them directly, Marcus used the chamber's architecture against them. He cut through support beams with his plasma cutter, bringing down sections of the ceiling to block their movements. When they tried to surround him, he used his portable shield generator to create barriers that forced them to approach from predictable angles, but it was Lyra who turned the tide of the battle. She discovered that her crystal technology could interfere with the hunter's mechanical implants. When she focused her power through the glowing crystal, the hunter's movements became sluggish and uncoordinated. Their artificial enhancements, designed to make them superior to their natural state, became weaknesses when disrupted by the ancient technology they had abandoned. Working together, Marcus and Lyra found a fighting style that combined human tactical innovation with alien mystical power. Marcus would use his technology to control the battlefield, while Lyra would disable their enemies' advantages. It was a partnership that neither species could have achieved alone. After defeating the three hunters in the chamber, Marcus and Lyra knew more would be coming. They had to escape the ruins and find a way off the planet. But as they made their way through the tunnel system, Lyra stopped at a particular chamber and refused to go further. Inside this chamber, it was something that made Marcus's breath catch in his throat. It was a massive crystal formation, larger than a human, that pulsed with the same energy as Lyra's small crystal, but magnified 1,000 times. The walls of the chamber were covered with images showing Lyra's people as they once were: tall, graceful beings who lived in harmony with crystal. Technology that seemed to blend science and art into something beautiful. Lyra placed her hand on the great crystal and closed her eyes. Images flowed directly into Marcus's mind, showing him the history of her people. They had once been a peaceful civilization that used crystal technology to enhance their natural abilities. But a faction had emerged that believed they could become more powerful by replacing their organic parts with mechanical ones. The war between the two factions had destroyed their civilization. The mechanically enhanced ones, calling themselves the Collective, had won by sheer numbers and firepower. They hunted down the remaining natural ones, either converting them or eliminating them. Lyra was the last who still carried the knowledge of the old ways, and not just running from them, Marcus realized, speaking aloud even though he knew she couldn't understand his words. You're carrying your entire culture's legacy. Lyra opened her eyes and looked at him, and Marcus saw that she had understood his meaning, if not his words. She touched his forehead, and for a moment their minds connected. Marcus felt her loneliness, her responsibility, and her growing affection for the strange alien who had treated her with kindness instead of fear. In return, Marcus shared his own memories with her. He showed her Earth, humanity's struggles to reach the stars, the diversity of human cultures, and the curiosity that drove humans to explore and learn. He showed her that she wasn't alone in the universe, that there were others who valued knowledge and growth over power and conformity. Their mental connection was interrupted by the sound of more hunters. But now Marcus understood what they were really fighting for. This wasn't just about survival. It was about preserving the possibility of a future where different species could learn from each other and grow together. The final confrontation came in the main chamber of the ruins. A dozen hunters, led by a figure who was more machine than organic, surrounded Marcus and Lyra. This leader, who introduced himself as Prime Seeker Kavak, had replaced so much of his original body with mechanical parts that he barely resembled Lyra's species anymore. You have caused significant disruption, human, Kavak said, his voice echoing with electronic distortion. Your influence has made the subject more resistant to collection. This complicates our mission. Good, Marcus replied, checking the charge on his plasma cutter. I was hoping to be a complication. The battle that followed was unlike anything in Marcus's experience. The hunters attacked with coordinated precision, their mechanical enhancements allowing them to move like a single entity. But Marcus and Lyra had developed something the collective couldn't understand: improvisation born from trust and mutual respect. When Marcus's weapons began to run low on power, Lyra channeled energy from her crystal into his equipment, supercharging his plasma cutter and shield generator. When the hunters tried to disrupt Lyra's connection to the Great Crystal, Marcus used his engineering knowledge to create a resonance amplifier from salvaged ship parts that strengthened her abilities. The turning point came when Marcus realized that the hunters' greatest strength was also their weakness. Their mechanical parts allowed them to coordinate perfectly, but they all depended on the same communication network. Using his knowledge of electronics and Lyra's crystal technology, Marcus created a feedback pulse that disrupted their entire collective consciousness. For the first time in centuries, the mechanically enhanced beings found themselves thinking as individuals instead of as parts of a collective mind. The confusion and fear that resulted from this sudden isolation was enough to give Marcus and Lyra the advantage they needed. Prime Seeker Kavak, his systems failing, made one last desperate attack. But instead of fighting him, Lyra did something unexpected. She used her crystal to show him a vision of what his people had been like before. They gave up their natural abilities. For just a moment, Kavak remembered what it felt like to be truly alive instead of just functionally efficient. The expression on his face, visible through his mechanical mask, was one of profound loss. He looked at Lyra and Marcus standing together, representing the possibility of growth and connection, and then at his own followers, trapped in their mechanical perfection. "What have we become?" he whispered, and then collapsed as failing systems finally shut down. The remaining hunters, their network disrupted and their leader fallen, retreated into the forest. They were no longer the unstoppable force they had been, just confused individuals trying to understand what they had lost. In the aftermath of battle, Marcus and Lyra worked together to repair his crashed ship. Her crystal technology could regenerate damaged systems in ways that human engineering couldn't match, while his technical knowledge could integrate alien and human technologies in unprecedented ways. As they prepared to leave the planet, Lyra made a decision that would change both their lives. She chose to come with Marcus, bringing her knowledge and her people's cultural legacy to the wider galaxy. Together, they would seek out others who valued learning and growth over power and control. Standing in the cockpit of the repaired ship, watching the planet fall away below them, Marcus reflected on how much had changed since his crash. He had arrived alone, just another human engineer on a routine mission. He was leaving as part of something new, a partnership between species that proved intelligence and compassion could transcend the boundaries of biology. Lyra curled up next to him in the co-pilot's seat, her crystal glowing softly as she worked to understand the ship's systems. She had licked the blood from his wounds and nuzzled into his neck when they first met, marking him as hers to protect. Now, as they traveled toward the stars together, Marcus realized that the bond they had formed was more than protection or companionship. It was the beginning of a new kind of relationship between species, one based on mutual respect, shared curiosity, and the understanding that the universe was vast enough for all kinds of intelligence to flourish together. As their ship entered hyperspace, carrying them toward unknown adventures among the stars, Marcus smiled and placed his hand over Lyra's. Whatever challenges awaited them in the galaxy, they would face them together, proving that the strongest bonds could form between the most unlikely companions. The end.